What's the most inaccurate thing your child has ever been taught in school? My son's third-grade teacher told the class that Christopher Columbus proved the Earth was round in 1492 because everyone before him thought it was flat. Ethan came home that evening drawing pictures of medieval people standing at the edge of a flat Earth, terrified of falling off. He was so excited to explain how brave Columbus was for sailing into the unknown when everyone thought he'd fall into space. I sat at the kitchen table staring at his homework worksheet that asked students to write 3 reasons why people in the Middle Ages believed the Earth was flat. My PhD in medieval European history from Cornell felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I teach at the State University, and I've spent 15 years researching exactly this period. The flat Earth myth is one of the most persistent historical lies in education, and it drives me absolutely insane. I asked Ethan where he learned this, and he showed me his textbook. Copyright 2003. The page had a cartoon of Columbus on a ship sailing toward the edge of a flat disk, while scared sailors pointed at the horizon. The caption read, "Columbus bravely proved the Earth was round when others believed it was flat." I felt my blood pressure rising because this wasn't just wrong, it was the opposite of true. Ancient Greeks had calculated the Earth's circumference to within 2% accuracy over 2,000 years before Columbus was born. Medieval scholars, monks, and educated people all knew the Earth was spherical. The argument between Columbus and the Spanish court wasn't about the shape of the Earth, it was about the size. Columbus thought Asia was much closer than it actually was, and the scholars correctly told him he'd die of starvation before reaching it. He only survived because he accidentally ran into the Americas. That night, I drafted a polite email to Mrs. Delacroix explaining the historical inaccuracy. I attached links to primary sources from medieval texts that clearly described a spherical Earth. I included references to Bede, Thomas Aquinas, and dozens of other medieval scholars who wrote extensively about Earth's roundness. I even found her textbook's publisher information and included a link to the updated curriculum standards that specifically listed this as a common myth to correct. I hit send at 11 p.m. and went to bed feeling like I'd done my duty as both a historian and a parent. The next morning, I got a reply. "Thank you for your concern. However, this is the curriculum I've been given, and I need to teach what's in the approved textbook. Perhaps you could discuss alternative viewpoints at home." Alternative viewpoints, like historical facts, were optional perspectives. I showed up at pickup that afternoon and politely asked Mrs. Delacroix if I could speak with her for a moment. She was in her late 50s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck and a cardigan covered in apple pins. She smiled tightly and said she only had a few minutes before bus duty. I explained as diplomatically as possible that the flat Earth myth wasn't just a small error, it was fundamentally changing how kids understood history, that it made medieval people seem ignorant and superstitious when they were actually quite sophisticated, that it gave Columbus credit for something he didn't do while erasing the actual achievements of ancient scientists. Mrs. Delacroix's smile got even tighter. She said she appreciated my passion, but she'd been teaching for 28 years and knew how to make history accessible for 8-year-olds. She said the story about Columbus proving the Earth was round was inspirational and helped children understand the age of exploration. I asked if we could at least add some context about what Columbus actually did versus what's mythological. She glanced at her watch and said she really needed to get to bus duty. Then she added that perhaps I was overcomplicating things for children this age, that third graders needed simple narratives they could understand, not college-level historical analysis. I felt dismissed, but tried to stay calm. I said I'd be happy to come in and do a short presentation about medieval science if that would help. She practically laughed. "I don't think that's necessary. We have a very packed curriculum." She walked away toward the buses, and I stood there in the parking lot feeling like I'd just been patted on the head and told to run along. That evening, Ethan had homework that required him to write an essay titled, "How Columbus Proved the Earth is Round." He sat at the kitchen table struggling with it because I'd already told him the truth. He looked up at me with confused eyes and asked which version he should write. I told him to write what his teacher wanted for the grade, but to remember the real history. He wrote the essay full of incorrect information, and I had to watch him do it. The next day, he came home upset because Mrs. Delacroix had read his essay to the class as an example of excellent work. She'd praised how he explained that medieval people were too scared and ignorant to sail far from shore. Ethan told me he felt weird about it because he knew that wasn't true, but all his classmates believed it now. I asked if he'd tried to correct anything, and he said he'd raised his hand to mention that Greeks knew the Earth was round. Mrs. Delacroix had smiled and said, "That's a nice thought, honey, but the Greeks lived a very long time ago, and most of their knowledge was lost." I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. The Greeks' knowledge wasn't lost. It was preserved and expanded by Islamic scholars, and then reintroduced to Europe through Spain and Italy during the medieval period. This was basic historical fact, not advanced theory. I sent another email that night, more detailed this time. I explained the history of scientific knowledge transmission. I attached images of medieval manuscripts showing diagrams of spherical Earth. I included quotes from medieval sources in Latin with translations. I cited the current state education standards that specifically mentioned correcting this myth. This time, Mrs. Delacroix didn't respond. 3 days went by with silence. Then Ethan came home with a note saying Mrs. Delacroix would like to schedule a parent-teacher conference about Ethan's recent classroom behavior. My stomach dropped. What behavior? Ethan said he'd raised his hand twice more to ask questions about the Columbus unit, and Mrs. Delacroix had told him to stop disrupting the lesson. He'd also mentioned to his classmates at lunch that the flat earth thing wasn't true, and apparently several kids had gone home and told their parents. Now Mrs. Delacroix was getting emails from other parents asking about it. The parent-teacher conference was scheduled for the following Monday after school. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited in the hallway outside her classroom. Through the door window, I could see her organizing papers with sharp, angry movements. When she finally called me in, her smile was more like baring teeth. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to discuss Ethan's disruptive behavior in class. He's been contradicting me in front of other students and it's undermining my authority." I sat down carefully. "He's been asking questions about historical accuracy. That's not disruption. That's critical thinking." She leaned forward. "He's been telling other students that what I'm teaching is wrong. Several parents have now emailed me questioning the curriculum. Do you understand how that makes me look?" I kept my voice level. "If the curriculum contains factual errors, shouldn't we correct them?" Her face flushed. "This is the approved textbook from the district. Are you suggesting you know better than the curriculum committee?" I pulled out my folder of sources. "I'm suggesting that historians know better than a 2003 textbook that perpetuates a myth created in the 1800s. She didn't even look at my folder. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't have time to redesign my entire unit because you have a problem with how history is taught to children. These are 8-year-olds. They need simple stories they can understand." That word again. Simple. Like historical accuracy was too complicated for children to grasp. I tried a different approach. What if I came in as a guest speaker? Just 15 minutes. I could show them some cool medieval inventions and explain that people back then were actually very smart. Make it fun. Mrs. Delacroix stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't allow parent volunteers to teach curriculum content. It creates too many complications." She walked to the door and opened it. "I hope we can move forward with Ethan focusing on completing his assignments as given rather than questioning every lesson." I left that meeting shaking with frustration. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I recorded a 10-minute video explaining the flat earth myth, why it's wrong, and what Columbus actually did. I made it kid-friendly with animations and jokes. I posted it on YouTube and sent the link to a few other parents from Ethan's class who'd reached out after their kids came home confused. The video got 50 views in the first day, mostly from parents, then 200 views. Then it got shared on a local parent Facebook group. By the end of the week, it had 5,000 views, and the comments were full of parents saying they'd learned this same myth in school and never questioned it. Some were angry, some were grateful. Several tagged the school district's official account. That's when my phone rang. It was Principal Okafor asking me to come in for a meeting the next morning. Principal Okafor was a serious woman in her early 50s who'd been running the school for 6 years. She got straight to the point. "Mr. Whitmore, I've received several complaints about a video you posted online that contradicts our curriculum." I'd prepared for this. I posted a factually accurate historical explanation. I didn't mention Mrs. Delacroix or the school by name. She pulled up the video on her computer. "Several parents have specifically referenced this in emails demanding we change how we teach the Columbus unit. This has created a significant disruption." I leaned forward. "With respect, Principal Okafor, the disruption is coming from teaching incorrect history. The video is just pointing that out." She studied me for a long moment. "You're a history professor?" I nodded. "Medieval European history. I've published 2 books on the period and taught it at the university level for 15 years. She turned her computer screen toward me. "Then perhaps you can help me understand this." She pulled up the state education standards. "Here it says we should teach about the age of exploration, including common myths and misconceptions. It specifically mentions the flat earth myth as something to address." I felt a small surge of hope. "Exactly. That's what I've been saying." She scrolled down further. "But our district-approved textbook, which was selected by a committee of educators, still teaches it the old way. So now I have a conflict between what the standards say and what the materials say." I suggested maybe they needed new textbooks. She laughed without humor. "Do you know how much it costs to replace textbooks for an entire grade level? We don't have that budget. These books need to last at least another 3 years." I pointed out they could at least supplement with accurate information. She nodded slowly. "That would require retraining teachers and creating new lesson plans. Most of our elementary teachers aren't history specialists. They teach from the guide that comes with the textbook." We sat in silence for a moment before I asked what she wanted me to do. Principal Okafor closed her laptop. "I want you to take down the video." My stomach sank. "Why?" She chose her words carefully. "Because it's causing conflict with our staff and creating a situation where parents don't trust what teachers are telling their children. Even if you're factually correct, it's undermining the educational environment." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you want me to take down accurate information to protect incorrect teaching?" She sighed. "I want you to work with us rather than against us. If you really want to fix this, help me figure out how to update the curriculum properly. Talk to the district curriculum coordinator. Present your research to the textbook committee. But taking potshots through YouTube videos isn't helping anyone." I asked if she'd at least talk to Mrs. Delacroix about incorporating more accurate information. She said she would, but made no promises. I left that meeting feeling defeated. I didn't take down the video. Instead, I did what Principal Okafor suggested and reached out to the district curriculum coordinator, a man named Dr. Vincent, who had an office at the district administrative building. He agreed to meet with me the following week. When I arrived at his office with my folder of sources and my list of suggestions, he greeted me warmly and seemed genuinely interested. I spent 45 minutes explaining the historical problems with the current Columbus curriculum. Dr. Vincent took notes and asked smart questions. At the end, he leaned back in his chair and said, "This is all very compelling, Mr. Whitmore. You're absolutely right that we're teaching outdated information." I felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone got it. Then he continued, "Unfortunately, changing elementary curriculum is a multi-year process. We'd need to form a committee, review options, get board approval, find budget for new materials." I asked how long that would take. He estimated 3 to 5 years minimum. I thought about Ethan and his classmates absorbing incorrect information for 3 to 5 more years. Dr. Vincent must have seen my face because he added, "I know that's frustrating, but education moves slowly. There are politics involved, union contracts, budget constraints. It's not like I can just snap my fingers and change what's being taught." I asked about interim solutions. Could we at least send guidelines to teachers about supplementing the textbook? He made a note. I can suggest that to the curriculum committee, but I can't mandate how individual teachers present the material. That's protected under academic freedom. Academic freedom to teach incorrect history. Wonderful. I thanked him for his time and left feeling like I'd just hit another brick wall. That evening, I got an email from Mrs. Delacroix. The subject line was, "Classroom disruption continued." The email was 3 paragraphs of professionally worded anger. She wrote that despite our previous conversations, Ethan was still contradicting instruction and causing confusion among his peers. She said she'd had to address the Columbus issue multiple times because students kept bringing up alternative facts they'd heard at home. She requested that I reinforce her lessons at home rather than undermining them. She ended by suggesting that if I continued to have concerns about the curriculum, I should address them through proper channels rather than coaching my child to disrupt classroom learning. I read that email 5 times, each time getting angrier. She was essentially asking me to lie to my son, to tell him to ignore historical facts and repeat myths because it was easier for her. I started typing a response but deleted it, then started again and deleted it again. Finally, my wife looked over my shoulder and suggested we escalate this to the district superintendent. The next morning, I sent a formal complaint to Superintendent Dr. Patricia Holmes. I attached all my previous correspondence, my research materials, the state standards highlighting the flat earth myth correction, and Mrs. Delacroix's emails. I explained that my son was being penalized for learning accurate history and that the school was resistant to correcting demonstrable errors. I requested a formal review of the 3rd grade history curriculum. 2 weeks went by with no response. Then I got a letter in the mail on official district letterhead. The superintendent acknowledged my complaint and said it had been forwarded to the appropriate committee for review. The review process could take 60 to 90 days. In the meantime, they expected all families to support the classroom teacher and follow the existing curriculum. They thanked me for my input and hoped we could work together in the future. It was the most polite brush-off I'd ever received. Meanwhile, things got worse at school. Ethan came home saying Mrs. Delacroix had announced to the class that some students were spreading misinformation about Columbus, and everyone needed to stick to what the textbook said. She'd given a pop quiz on the Columbus unit, and Ethan had answered one question differently than what she taught. The question was, what did Columbus prove in 1492? The textbook answer was, that the earth is round. Ethan wrote, that you could sail west to reach Asia, though he was wrong about the distance. He got the question marked wrong. When I saw that quiz with the red X next to his factually correct answer, something broke inside me. I scanned it and posted it on Twitter, along with a thread explaining the situation. I tagged educational advocacy groups and history organizations. The tweet went viral overnight. Suddenly, I had reporters from the local news asking for interviews. History professors from other universities were sharing it and commenting. The Washington Post education blog picked it up. My YouTube video, which had plateaued at around 10,000 views, suddenly shot up to 500,000 views in 3 days. The school board's Facebook page was flooded with comments from people all over the country demanding they fix the curriculum. And then my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was an attorney from the school district's legal department. She very politely informed me that my social media posts were creating a hostile work environment for Mrs. Delacroix and asked me to cease making public statements about the school. I asked if they were threatening me. She said no, just requesting that I consider the impact of my actions on the staff. When I asked what about the impact of incorrect teaching on the students, she said she wasn't authorized to discuss curriculum matters. The situation exploded into something I never intended. A parent protest group formed demanding curriculum reform. They organized a demonstration at the next school board meeting. Over 200 people showed up, filling the meeting room to capacity with overflow outside. I was asked to speak for 3 minutes during public comment. I stood at the podium looking at the board members and explained as clearly as I could that this wasn't about me or Mrs. Delacroix. It was about whether we prioritized historical accuracy or convenient myths in education. Board member after board member nodded politely and said they'd take my concerns under advisement. Then a board member named Kaufman, who'd been on the board for 20 years, spoke up. "Mr. Whitmore, I learned that Columbus proved the earth was round when I was in school. So did my children. So did everyone here. And we all turned out fine. Why is this suddenly such a problem?" I took a deep breath. "With respect, Mr. Kaufman, the fact that a myth is widespread doesn't make it true. And just because previous generations learned incorrect information doesn't mean we should keep teaching it." He waved his hand dismissively. "This seems like political correctness run amok. We're rewriting history to suit modern sensibilities." That's when I lost my patience. "We're not rewriting anything. We're correcting a myth that was invented by Washington Irving in the 1820s to make Columbus seem more heroic. The actual historical record is clear. Medieval people knew the earth was round. This isn't opinion or perspective. It's documentable fact." Another board member, a woman named Sterling, jumped in. "Mr. Whitmore, are you suggesting our teachers are incompetent?" I was walking into a trap, but couldn't stop. "I'm suggesting our teachers are teaching from outdated materials and are resistant to updating when presented with evidence." The room erupted. Parents on my side started applauding. Parents who supported the teachers started booing. Board members called for order. The meeting devolved into chaos and was eventually ended early. I left feeling like I'd just made everything worse. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from another parent in Ethan's class. "Just heard Mrs. Delacroix is taking stress leave because of the situation. They're bringing in a substitute for the rest of the semester." I felt sick. I never wanted to drive a teacher out of her job. I just wanted my kid to learn real history. The next morning, Principal Okafor called me directly. Her voice was cold. "I hope you're satisfied, Mr. Whitmore. Mrs. Delacroix has been teaching here for 28 years, and you've managed to chase her out in 3 months." I protested that I'd never attacked her personally, only questioned the curriculum. She cut me off. "When a parent makes a teacher a target on social media, that's personal whether you intended it or not." The substitute teacher, Mr. Rao, was a retired history teacher who actually knew the material correctly. He spent the first week reviewing the Columbus unit and gently correcting the misinformation. Several kids came home confused about what they should believe now. Ethan told me some of his classmates blamed him for getting Mrs. Delacroix in trouble. One kid said his mom said I was a troublemaker who thought I was smarter than everyone else. Another said their dad called me a virtue-signaling academic who couldn't let kids just be kids. The social dynamics in the class had fractured, and it was my fault. Meanwhile, the school board formed a committee to review the history curriculum. They asked if I'd serve on it. I said yes, hoping I could finally make a constructive difference. The first meeting was tense. Half the committee members treated me like a bomb about to explode. The other half watched carefully to see which way this would go. Over 6 months of meetings, we slowly worked through the issues. We identified outdated content across multiple grade levels. We found budget for supplementary materials that could be used until new textbooks were adopted. We created teacher training on how to present historical complexity in age-appropriate ways. It was exhausting and slow and often frustrating, but it was progress. Meanwhile, Mrs. Delacroix never came back. She took early retirement, and I heard through the parent grapevine that she blamed me for ending her career. I wrote her a letter apologizing for how things had spiraled, explaining I'd never intended to target her personally. She never responded. Ethan finished 3rd grade with Mr. Rao, who taught him that history is complicated and messy and full of competing narratives. He learned to question sources and think critically about what he was told. But he also learned that questioning authority comes with social costs. His friendships shifted. Some kids avoided him because their parents thought I was trouble. The new curriculum was finally approved the following school year. New textbooks were ordered that taught the flat earth myth as exactly that, a myth. Teachers received training on scientific and historical accuracy. The district updated its standards to align with current scholarship. I should have felt victorious, but mostly I just felt tired. The whole experience had taught me that being right isn't enough, that institutional change requires patience and diplomacy and political maneuvering that I wasn't good at, that fighting for truth can cost relationships and reputation even when you win. Ethan is in 6th grade now, and he's become the kid who fact-checks everything. His teachers either love him or find him exhausting. When he comes home with something questionable, we look it up together and then decide if it's worth addressing or if we should just correct it at home and move on. We've learned to pick our battles more carefully, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I should have just let it go. Let him write the incorrect essay about Columbus and the flat earth. Let him believe the simplified myth along with everyone else. Would his life be easier? Would mine? Probably. But then I think about all the kids in that district who will now learn accurate history, who will understand that medieval people were smart and sophisticated, who will grow up questioning myths and demanding evidence, and I think maybe it was worth it after all, even if Mrs. Delacroix would disagree, even if half the parents in that school think I'm an arrogant troublemaker, even if my son has to deal with being known as that kid whose dad caused all that drama. Because in the end, truth matters, history matters, and teaching kids to think critically matters more than keeping everyone comfortable with convenient lies. I just wish it didn't have to be so hard. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.